Hello, everyone. I will now be taking over, trying to host. Sorry about that. I have no idea. Oh, it's because comments were off. Should I go back? Oh, crap. Um, let's see. My team's going to tell me whether I'm going to go back to Pete. Technology. Technology is with us. I think I'm going to head back. I might run back here in just a sec. Hang on. Sorry, guys. I'm going to sign into Pete Buttigieg right now. So let me go do that. If that doesn't work, I'll be back here. Sorry, see you in a minute. Ah. All right, I think it looks like we're switching here. So we're gonna do this. I'm gonna see if I can get Pete in. Da, 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 bum, 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 bum. All right, I think I'm beaming Pete in.
There we go.
Pete,
All right.
yes,
Beautiful.
victory is ours.
Hope you're keeping well. Doing
It's
all
the
right?
gram, man. The gram. The gram. Yeah, yeah. Things are good over here. Uh, yeah, the family's good. Learning a
Good.
lot about my kids, which means I'm learning a bit about myself.
I'll bet. How are you doing the kind of homeschooling division of labor at home?
Oh, well, my wife's a rock star. We have
Yes.
them logged in for at least a number of hours per day. But the annoying thing, Pete, I don't know if anyone has told anyone this, but like your kids log in, but then they just drift off because nothing is keeping them actually there. So they'll literally just get up and like walk away and like go try and get some gummy snacks or whatever. So there has to be an adult somewhere in the vicinity making sure that they don't just stray because they're 4 and 7,
Right.
and our 7-year-old is on the spectrum, and so he's
That's
hard
right.
to corral in one place. But generally, things are good, and I'm super grateful to the teachers because the teacher is bad for the parents. I gotta say, if you're a
Yeah.
teacher, and imagine trying to teach a group of kids, and then just the kid like wanders off, then you have to, and you can't even do
Well, it
anything
gives you a
about
whole
it
new
because they're like,
appreciation for the classroom management that they do every day, right? Because even in person, it's challenging to hold their attention. But yeah, it must be a whole nother level of challenge when it's
they're
remote.
saints because all I know is if I was trying to teach kids and then just like wandered off, I would just be like, oh, like all the time. So they just like stay so positive and supportive. I'm sure when the class ends though, they're like, phew, because it's a lot of work for them.
No kidding, yeah, and I think hopefully we learn on the back end of this how to have new ways to integrate in person and virtual learning. But I think one of the things we're learning is just how long the way we have to go before e-learning really comes into its own in America. So hats off to you for negotiating that at home and navigating it all.
Well, hats off to the teachers. Every day is Teacher Appreciation Day. Let's get the teachers a raise. I think
Amen.
your family, like your one of your parents is a professor, right? Did I make that up?
That's right. Yeah, both of them. So I grew up with educators, and then I married Chaston, of course, as a teacher. So I've always been surrounded by educators. And you're right. I mean, it's Teacher Appreciation Week this week, but we should always be doing more and making sure we're showing that support because I think the profession is showing just how much it deserves to be taken more seriously, which is of course something that you and I both talked about a lot on the campaign trail, and rightly so. And this is the first time we've been in touch a little bit, but this is our first chance to catch up really since both of us were campaigning. So I'd love to learn a little more about just how you're. I know for us, it feels like we went through this period where by the end we would celebrate just if we're going to be in the same hotel 2 nights in a row because that felt like being a little more normal than usual. And suddenly we're practically on a kind of house arrest here. It's just a total shift in life. Do you feel like you've had a chance to look back and put the campaign in perspective, or are you still kind of digesting and coming off of that flow?
I think I'm a little bit like you, Pete. I still have no idea what happened, genuinely. Where if you look at the timeline, the campaign ends, and then it's probably just like a handful of weeks, and then we're in quarantine.
Yeah.
So it's still really unclear what the new normal would be, because the new normal has just been, hanging out in the house, trying to keep the kids in front of a screen for X hours a day, and then, so I feel you. I feel like you and I can relate to a set of experiences that only a very small handful of people have ever had. And what most people don't realize, I think, is that if you're candidates like you and me, like you and I met in Iowa in total obscurity at Progress,
Right.
Iowa, before anyone was paying any attention to anything. It was you, me, Chasten was there,
That's
Eric
right.
Swalwell.
Yeah.
I think there was a fourth person, maybe Jeff
Yeah.
Merkley.
I think it was. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And yeah, and who would have guessed, looking at us that night, which combination of us would kind of finish the way we did. I mean, it shows just the crazy twists and turns that this thing can take. And
I don't know what you're talking about, Pete, because I saw you speak and I was like, that dude is so sharp. Holy crap.
Well, it's nice to hear, and definitely got my attention the way you're talking about issues that are now, I think, even more salient. In fact, one of the things I want to be sure to take up some of the questions that my followers have sent over, and one of them that was on my mind. I know you've talked about this quite a bit publicly, but I'd love to take it up with you a little bit. Is Sam wanted to know just how has the pandemic shared either of our views on UBI, and certainly for me, a universal basic income. And for me, I was always intrigued by the idea. You were really the leader, though, in terms of being the most committed to it. I thought it was interesting, but was always curious to see what more we could learn from the experiments that are going on out there. But now with employment being more uncertain than ever, I think we're learning just how many things need to be decoupled from just being dependent on certain kind of employment arrangements. Certainly around things like healthcare, sick leave, other benefits. But of course, income itself is what a lot of people are asking about. So I wonder, does it feel to you just like you effectively believe the same things you did about UBI, but now other people are viewing it the same way, or would you say that your views in some ways might have changed or developed or evolved given what's happened in our economy and in our country in the last couple of months?
Well, Pete, what I've been saying is that we're experiencing 10 years worth of change in 10 weeks. You know what I mean? And so the things I was most concerned about, instead of being like a few years away, are here and now. That includes the fact that now tens of millions of Americans have gotten displaced from the workforce, and a lot of those jobs are not coming back. So I think universal basic income is a necessity right now, certainly in the heart of this crisis. And obviously, I think that we should continue it in perpetuity. So yeah, like this has just made my commitment all the more immediate and urgent.
The other issue that you've been really out front on, and unfortunately it's become really really disturbing and really central, is and we got a lot of questions about this. Christina's one of them. She said, Trump has incited so much racism toward Asians during this time, and I know you stepped up to combat that. Can you talk a little bit about your efforts and maybe what you think is most effective in making sure we just draw a line that says that, of course, any racism is unacceptable, and this kind of resurgence in racism directed at Asian Americans has absolutely no place in the way that our country should be dealing with this emergency?
Now, Pete, I appreciated your amplifying that message, and the racism and the assaults against Asian Americans. It's just been heartbreaking, and I certainly feel it, because like when you go out there with a mask on and you have an Asian face, like you can tell that people are lingering when they look at you, and friends and family have experienced worse than dirty looks. There are people that are afraid to leave their homes in the Asian American community. So it's a terrible effect of this crisis. And I agree that Donald Trump has made it worse by trying to racialize this virus, saying it's a Chinese effort to distract from his own failures. And the thing that we have to try and drill into everyone's heads is that there's a Chinese government, and then there's the Chinese people, and then there are Asian Americans, completely different groups of people. And Asian Americans are just victims of this crisis, just like anyone else. Many Asian Americans are on the front lines trying to keep our relatives alive. And I will speak for many Asian Americans where we're pissed off at the Chinese government too. I mean, like we're just like you. We're like sitting in our houses, like, thinking what could people have done better, and that does begin with the Chinese government.
Yeah, and one of the challenges is I think we really have to be ready to face a challenge from China and step up. I had a piece over the weekend in the Washington Post about my view that China, especially that the Chinese government, is actually rooting for another Trump term, because the more dysfunctional and divided and chaotic things are here in the U.S., the more a lot of those more aggressive economic and geopolitical ambitions that Beijing has will be advanced. But I think we've got to make really sure that even if there is going to be, frankly, more tension in the years to come in terms of the U.S.-China relationship, that it is abundantly clear that there is zero place, precisely because this is a contest largely over values, right? That in our multiracial, multi-ethnic, pluralistic democracy, there's no place for that kind of racism and racialized mistreatment. And it's just one more reason why we've got to defeat this president, right? So one other question that I thought was interesting, that I have some thoughts on, but I'd love to hear yours. Cecilia said, you both had appeal beyond typical Democratic voters. And she wants to know, how do we capture that in order to win in November?
I don't know about you, Pete, but I thought I'd be on the trail campaigning for Joe right now in Michigan or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania. So to the extent that you and I appeal to folks who need to get won over to Joe, then we need to work on it. And I know I'm actually, like, I know my supporters, there was one poll that said 42% did not plan on supporting the Democratic nominee. So I think of the candidates, I have the most work to do.
That means you got the most potential to bring people along too. So I think that's huge, because people need to see that we're all on the same team, right? And it's not that we abandoned some of the ideas that maybe made us different from each other. It's just that whatever differences there were in our styles or approaches are like this compared to this gulf between us and what's going on right now. And the way I've been thinking about it is, this election is going to be about whether we even bother as a country to take on income inequality or climate change or gun violence or any of these issues we debated. And I was thinking about us on those debate stages where we're debating how to do it, or how much to do it, or how aggressively to do it. And that same debate, I think, will happen in government, right? Especially once we have, as we've got to work to do, the House and the Senate and the White House. That's another time where we'll debate how much and how aggressively to deal with these things. But in between, like right now in general, this is where we're dealing with whether to deal with this at all. We got a president who doesn't think systemic racism is a problem. We got an administration that doesn't believe climate change is real. And so we can argue, and we will argue, the finer points of how exactly.
I hope we have the opportunity to argue, exactly.
First we got to get in there, right?
To figure out what the proposal and solutions look like. But it's all hands on deck right now. We just got to beat this guy. I could not agree more.
So there are some questions about just what it was like on the trail too, that I'm always curious to talk about with other people who've been there, because it's such a small group. But let's see, one of the, here's kind of a cool one. Jenna wanted to know what each of us thought was the best thing about the Others campaign. So I'll start. I love the way that you reached out to people who didn't maybe view themselves as political, who were intelligent, who knew that politics mattered, but were not people who maybe followed the blow-by-blow political campaigns, or maybe didn't see themselves in the campaign process. And I think the way that you just spoke directly to ideas, to what matters about this, it was really cool watching the way that had an effect on people. And I'll also say, it was not unusual for Yang Gang folks to show up at my events. And I'd see people with the math hat, Make America Think Harder hat. And, they were definitely still supporting you, and they were not here to create any problems for me. I mean, they were some of the nicest, coolest people to talk to. They were just curious, and they wanted to kind of engage in another campaign. And I thought there was something really great about that at the moment when we saw such an edge come in, to the extent that, in our politics, sometimes the worst elements of social media, kind of social emotional style, would kind of find their way into events in real life too. So those are some of the things I really enjoyed about what you were up to. But now it sounds like I'm fishing for a compliment. I swear, this is just
we know the dynamic.
But I'm curious what you saw, or for that matter, some of the other campaigns.
I mean, in your campaign, Pete, we admired your media strategy so much. We were like, oh my gosh, like there was a point where you couldn't go anywhere without seeing you, like on the TV or in a podcast. And we were blown away. We thought, it's like, wow, like he and his team, like Liz Smith, like is friends with some of the people on our team. And we just admired the heck out of your organization, and the fact that you had so many of those organizational values that were embedded in the campaign team. The fact that you were very data driven in terms of how you operated, and yet you still had these values that folks could all recite. It was really impressive. You had a very impressive organization.
Thanks. Yeah, we're proud of them, and it definitely served us well to go to places, as I know you did too, that maybe traditional political advisors would say, maybe don't go there. But, for us, we got as much out of communicating on, podcasts or TMZ or other places as we did kind of, the Sunday shows sometimes. Maybe some more fun questions that just came across. Jen wants to know what books we're reading in quarantine, and I know you're an author. In fact, the first time I met you, I got a copy of your book, and really curious what's got you. I know for me, at least, it's taken a while to just have my mind quiet to where I even can like sit and read a book after the kind of pace of the campaign trail. But to the extent you get any time to pause and read, is there anything that's got your attention lately?
I'm with you, man. I think reading actually helps quiet the mind, which you probably found in this last number of days. But I launched a podcast, and with each person we bring on, if they wrote a book, I then read that book. So the reason why I was glancing around is that I literally have copies of the books like right in front of me. So one is Crystal Ball and Saagar Enjeti's Populist Guide to 2020, which we had Crystal on this week. And then this book, Pete, should be. Well, it's been out for a little while, but it's called iGen. It's about the effect, or really the next generation, and technology's impact on their mental health, on your mental health. So all you people out there watching this, and then Healing Politics by Abdul El-Sayed.
Nice.
So it's one of the fun things about a podcast is that you have authors on, and then you have no choice but to read their book because you don't want to be like a terrible, frankly, moderator. It's like I got to say, when I went on an interview and someone read my book, which was not common at all. Like if they did that, that was like above and beyond. I was so grateful, and so now it's time for me to show the same diligence and courtesy, really.
Yeah. One thing I really missed on the campaign was the ability to read. Although we got a little bit, I was just going back to, this was my friend on the campaign trail, and I'm still working my way through it, but there's a new volume, relatively new volume in the life of Lincoln. You can tell that Truman, our dog, actually, I kept it too close to some beef jerky, I think, in my briefcase. I came home one day and the dog kind of ate the face off of it. But this is a really interesting book because this entire brick of a book just covers the years between 1856 and 1860. And it was a really dark time, of course, in America, headed toward the Civil War. And when I'm looking for consolation about the bleak and divided moment we're in, there's a lot to look at in terms of it definitely having been worse, in terms of how scrambled our politics was. And then so this is all before Lincoln even becomes president. In fact, first 150 pages, they don't even get to Lincoln. It's just about the political environment and what's going on. Really, really interesting. And then there's a book that came out while we were running, but I didn't get a chance to read it much, on the public option, which I think is interesting because it's not just about healthcare. So, whatever you think about the right answer on healthcare, it's worth remembering that there are a lot of areas where a public response or an optional public solution could make a difference. Postal banking, I know, is an idea that's gotten a lot of attention. Public options for 401ks. You could argue the library is kind of the public library is the original public option. And so from a progressive perspective, now especially at a moment when we've seen all the problems happening in the private sector, it's worth thinking about other places we could apply that.
Libraries are among the most trusted institutions in American life at this point. When you look at who people actually will believe, it's like librarians are really high. Love the local library. You read it really. So. Yeah, you sound like a student of history, Pete. And I sense that about you, actually. You always seem to be drawing upon these greater themes and narratives.
I try to, because you'd like to believe that we can learn from the past, but there's also no going back. And one of the things I really admire about you is how you think so much about the future. And I think what we have to do now is be informed by how we got here, but recognize that there's no going back. Even if it were possible, it wouldn't be desirable. to go back to the old normal. So we got an amazing window right now, and I'm really glad that you're continuing to be a thought leader out there. I know you're coming up against another commitment, so I'll respect your time. I know we got to step out, but any last thoughts? Or things
No, I've got another couple minutes. I'm going to squeeze it out. This is more fun than whatever else I'm going to do.
Well, here's another fun question. Quinn said, I love how you both shared your families during the campaign. What's your best piece of marriage advice? And I love getting to know Evelyn on the trail, and she stepped forward in a really brave way to as a figure. We ask so much of our spouses when we hit the trail with them. What would you offer by way of response on marriage advice, or maybe what you learned about your marriage through that race?
Well, I'm really grateful to Evelyn on so many levels. I joked, I've been happily married now for 9 years, which makes you an expert on being married for 9 years. But I think the biggest piece of advice really is that you have to prioritize being together more than being right. That's really it. It's like there is no right or wrong. It's just together. And like, if you can get to that point, then, then the relationship becomes like more important than whatever you're dealing with at that moment. And it's easier said than done, frankly. Like I'm someone who feels very, let's say like I have a firm sense of right and wrong. And so just being able to say, well, like the relationship transcends who's right or wrong in a particular situation actually took me a lot of time to get there. And it involved when we had our first child, which I hope you and Chaz have a dog, which is like what we did. We had like training wheels for the kid in the form of a dog. But then after you have a child, like it tests your relationship in new ways.
Of course.
And then that's when I think I truly grew as a partner, really.
That's really powerful. There's a lot of wisdom in that. I'm going to think about that because I hadn't heard it put in those words, but that's so important. And it's an example of how sometimes we grow in terms of just what we're able to put away or kind of relax on in our own kind of minds or our own stubbornness. And that's definitely been a part of how being married to Chasten has been such an important thing that compelled me and helped me to grow. As you know, Chasten was somebody who didn't ask for being involved in politics, but just jumped into it in such a great way. And
well, he's a freaking natural. I don't know if he's around, but like Chasten, I can say that like he felt like your secret weapon, and I I sort of envied the two of you, honestly.
Yeah, no, he took to it. He's probably doing something too. But if you're watching, babe, stop by. He'd enjoy saying hi, and it's so great watching him. I hear someone come down the steps. Let's see if.
Well, I hope so. This would be fun.
Oh, here he is. Hey.
Buddy and I were watching from the couch.
Burning. Oh, so fun. How are you? Like watching from the other floor?
Yeah, I was trying to keep Buddy quiet downstairs.
Oh, well, it's good to see you. Like I was saying to Pete, that the thought of the two of you together during this quarantine actually makes me happy. Like I feel like the two of you are making up for lost time.
Yeah.
So it feels.
But it is nice to be able to come down. It's 100 miles an hour to 0, but we're lucky that we have separate rooms, so can get reacquainted, but on our own time.
If you followed his Instagram, he's turned the attic into a proper studio space. I kind of envy it. I'm trying to look dignified with my books here.
Yeah, you need some plants.
Oh, nice work.
Fill in some gaps.
Oh, the bookshelf, it works for you, Pete. Like I don't even think I have that. I don't know what's behind me. I'm like blind.
We'll send you a book.
Yeah, I
Take
need
care.
a few. Justin, good seeing you. Pete, let's do this again. This was a lot of fun.
I love it. Same here. Thanks for taking some time.
And let's team up to freaking beat this guy come the fall. Like, I know you're the same as I am, where anything Joe needs us to do, let's freaking do it.
That's right. We've got, it's not just what we're up against, it's what we have a chance to do. I think, Joe's right on that the soul of the nation is at stake right now. And we have a chance, not just in terms of policy, but in terms of the moral message that the presidency can send. This is a time we've got to be determined to come together. And
Couldn't
hopefully I
agree
will
more.
get to see you out there on the trail in person one of these days too.
Hopefully soon. And next time we'll do it in your Instagram because I owe you that.
Sounds good. We'll figure it out.
We'll do it on yours
No,
next
thanks
time.
for adjusting on the fly. Appreciate it. It's great seeing you.
Great seeing you too, Pete.
Give all our best to Evelyn and the kids and everybody in the Yang Gang out there. It's great being with you.
Thank you, Team Pete. See you all soon. Hopefully in person. All right. I'm gonna